Thank you for joining us today for our reopening, relaunching, revisioning time together and answering some questions that hopefully will be an assistance to you, stir your thought process as our churches are given the opportunity in the days ahead to reopen. So the Newfound Baptist Association appreciates the time and the effort that Pastor Bradley Johnson and Johnny Byrd have put in to being with us in this video series this week on Thursday the 14th. So Bradley, let's talk about three other questions that we haven't covered this week. First of all, what do you perceive Newfound doing to protect the most vulnerable, our senior adults?
We want everyone to feel protected when they come to worship at Newfound. We want it to be a safe space. And so we want them to understand we're doing all we can to, of course, clean our facilities, but also make things very convenient for them, like keeping doors open and making things as touchless as possible. And we want to provide masks for those. We want to make sure hand sanitizer's out, but we also want to remind those who are not as vulnerable to consider others. And that may be just thinking about social distancing and just good practices when it comes to hygiene, just making sure they're watching out for those who are vulnerable. We also want to give them a safe out. So if they're in a ministry position right now and they feel like it puts them at risk, we want them to be able to feel like they can step back for a season away from that ministry, just so that they will be able to protect themselves or their families. And we want them to feel that they can do that without any guilt, and we'll be able to just fill in the gap there. Right. So we just want to communicate very well to them to feel safe.
Exactly. Someone mentioned last week that they had planned possibility of allowing senior adults to dismiss first.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
As they leave the worship, so that they could exit the building and be in their cars, so that they would be confronted with navigating a crowd of
I like that.
people. So that's something that might be helpful in places. So the Lord's Supper, the Lord's table, is something that we hold so dear, observing that ordinance of the church. And so looking ahead, how do you see that unfolding in Newfound?
Yeah, so I've given some thought to this, and of course I want Scripture to guide everything we do. I want Scripture to really just shape how we think about all practices at Newfound, and of course that is very important when it comes to the Lord's Supper, just an important ordinance for the life of our church. And so we know it's a command from our Lord, and we want to observe the Lord's Supper, we want to celebrate the Lord's Supper, but we want to do it wisely. And so there's going to be a few changes, but we also don't want to take away from that time. And so there's a lot of options on the table, but we want to make sure that by taking certain options that we don't actually just pull away from the actual worship itself and protecting the Lord's Supper. So that said, we're probably at the beginning just not going to observe it because we believe that the Lord understands. I mean, He knows what's going on, and I think it would be better for us to just slow down and not observe it at first until we feel safe. And of course, the way we do it now is we pass trays, we have our deacons serve the congregation. We'll probably do things a little bit different, whether that means people come up and get the Lord's Supper, our deacons will still be involved, but we're not passing the elements around to the whole congregation.
Gotcha. What changes do you see coming as we observe the ordinance of baptism?
Yeah, that's going to be a little easier, I think. I mean, because you're not involving everyone touching elements, and so it's going to be just a little bit easier. We want to celebrate baptism, and so I don't see that much will change when it comes to that.
Okay.
When it comes to baptism, especially as we begin meeting, and I'm saying all this anticipating we're going to be meeting again rather soon.
Sure, and it might be that. And I guess this would be a question that had to be posed to the candidate, or if the candidate's a minor, to the parents. Would they be more comfortable if you wore a mask when you baptized their child or participated?
I'm not sure I would feel that comfortable doing that.
I know it'd be very different for us, wouldn't it? So, just a bonus question for everybody. I know everyone would be interested in your thoughts on, is this an opportunity coming out of this pandemic? Is it an opportunity to do some revisioning for the days ahead. We're going to come out looking much different. How do you see any process of revisioning?
Yeah. Well, just by nature, I am slow to change. I don't like change. I'm not creative, and that's just my personality and characteristics. So I'm not quick to change. So the Lord really has to push me out of my comfort zone to force me to change.
Yeah.
And for instance, I'm not on social media. It took a global pandemic to get me on Facebook. And so all that to say is I'm not one quick to try to recast or revision ministry. There are some things I think this is an opportune time that we can change. There's some things I've been praying about at ministry at Newfound that I think that we can shift a little bit and do things a little bit differently. And this is going to be a great opportunity to change those things. So I think it's foolish to say things are not going to change, because things are going to change.
Exactly.
And we just need to figure out how to do it the way the Lord wants us to do it better.
Sure. And it's a great time as we adjust that in revisioning that we come into alignment with our mission statement.
Exactly.
Lastly, how's this pandemic changed you?
Well, I guess the first thing is, as I just said a few moments ago, I'm slow to change, and I don't like change.
Yeah.
I get in my comfort zone, and I like to just pace myself there and plod along. But sometimes we need to get out of our comfort zone, and so it's really some things I've learned about myself is I love people. I mean, I've known that, but I'm an introvert by nature. But I really, really miss people and getting together with people and worshiping and fellowshipping. Yeah. Another thing is I have a love-hate relationship with technology. You know, we're so thankful for it, but I've also experienced the limitations of technology through this. Whether that's us trying to get teaching materials out and just coming into obstacles, and I've seen some benefits of it, but I've also seen the limitations of it as well. So I've realized, that I really have to lean on other people a lot more and some of their giftedness.
Okay. Bradley, thank you for taking the time
Yes, sir.
to share with
Thank
us
you.
this week. And we are praying for you and for your family and for the Newfound congregation.
Thank you so much, Barry.
Johnny Byrd joins me now again from the North Point Baptist Church. Johnny, we're closing out this series for this week with 3 questions. And actually, there's a couple of bonus questions, too, I want you to get your input on. So, first of all, senior adults are usually in the most vulnerable age group. And so, as it relates to the North Point congregation, have you talked about measures that you will take to protect senior adults?
And of course, we want everyone to feel, comfortable coming to church, especially our senior adults. The room they meet in right now is very, very small. So we're going to find a different place for them to meet on campus that's a larger space for them, more room to space out. So that's one thing that I've thought about. But we're going to continue to do the online, the Facebook Live worship. So if some aren't comfortable coming back right away, they'll still be able to participate in those ways.
Do you find your senior adults are connecting on Facebook online? Do you think many of them are? You're getting
Many
that
of them
feedback?
are. Yeah, many of them are. So.
And it is true, from what conversations I'm having, that many senior adults will not return immediately. They'll wait for a while. And some might not be comfortable returning until there is a vaccine. So the Lord's Supper and baptism are 2 very cherished ordinances in the life of our churches here in Baptist life. So tell us about any changes that North Point might see in the days ahead as it comes to observing the Lord's Supper.
Well, there's going to have to be some changes. It's so vital to worship when you talk about the Lord's Supper and baptism. Those are worshipful things that the church does. So it has to continue in some form or fashion. So I've thought about one of the churches I've served at previously had the prepackaged. You had the juice and the wafer, and so I've thought about that. Maybe just having places where people could go and get it themselves.
Okay.
But it may take more effort to really make that more meaningful and more worshipful. So something still praying through that, but
Okay.
definitely something we'll continue to do. Not sure when we will start it back, but that is something I'm thinking through.
So you see the prepackaged juice and wafer as an option
Absolutely, yeah.
to at least look at. People could come through, take that, and return to their seat, right? And
Right.
observe. Okay, thank you. Baptism, Johnny. Someone has said through one of the many articles that's been published in the last few weeks that they see baptism as being one candidate at a time and one candidate only in one pool of water, which brings a whole nother dynamic to what we'd have to do in draining a pool, filling it. Has North Point given any thought to how you'd move forward?
I have thought about that, and I saw that same thing.
Okay.
Our church, I guess most churches are excited when someone's baptized.
Oh, yeah.
So to me, it's not a bad idea to spread them out. Right now, we've got 5 or 6, I think,
Okay.
that need to be baptized. So there's an excitement to thinking we might have a baptism for 6 straight weeks,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
or something like that. But
Okay.
we probably will space them out, but the
Yeah.
method, it won't change. I don't see how it can, so.
Many have said that this time coming out of a pandemic like this is a great opportunity to revision, maybe to revisit your vision statement or mission statement, or to bring in line what you're doing with the mission statement, you know, and bring that into alignment. Do you see any avenues of revisioning for North Point as you come out of this time?
Well, I don't know that the vision changes.
Okay.
I think our methods might change.
Okay.
And something I thought about last week is it's not because of persecution necessarily, but in a lot of ways, the church is being forced out of its meeting place.
Mm.
And so one of the things I thought about is the church is being forced back into its neighborhoods, into its
Wow.
communities.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm really encouraging our small groups. Hey, meet in somebody's yard.
Exactly.
Let your neighbors see what's going on. Maybe that'll give you opportunity to
Mhm.
have conversation. I've been outside more in the past 5 weeks than I probably have in the past 5 years, just because of what's going on. Working in my yard, I've had conversations with neighbors that I've never had conversations with before. So there's a lot of positives to this, and I think that's one of it. It's in a lot of ways we're kind of like the early church in Acts, where because of persecution they were pushed out. Well, for other reasons we're being pushed out.
Exactly.
So the vision doesn't change. So how does our method of meeting that vision
Absolutely.
change?
Thank you. How do you perceive that this time in history, through this time of pandemic, what have you learned through this time, do you think?
I've learned that I'm very insufficient. I'm not, I always knew I was, but now I realize I really am. But, when you're in ministry and you've been in ministry for many years, there's always that line to where it's your ministry, but it's your job.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I've really learned over the past few weeks, just through doing things that I normally wouldn't do as far as trying to stay connected to our people, is that I really love our people. And I really miss our time together. So that's probably what I've learned more than anything.
And the feedback I'm getting from lay people whom I meet, talk to, is that we all are experiencing that. Some separation anxiety, I think.
Yeah.
And we might have taken for granted the value of spending time together, not only in corporate worship, but in small groups. And so I think many of us are understanding at a heightened level how important our relationships are. So I appreciate you and Bradley Johnson joining us this week. Join us again next week for week 3, which will be Monday, May the 18th. And we continue a 4-part series next week. Thank you for joining the Buncombe Baptist.